Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Should have reached, I'll be doing my February wrap up. So for February is actually a okay month for me. It was worse than January, but I think overall I'm still very pleased. I read a total of 10 books, and for those 10 books I read 4,568 pages. So once again, everything is less than January, but I'm so happy about it just because I was traveling for a bit in February and things were just kind of chaotic with my life, but overall very happy. And then out of the 10 books I read, one book that I gave 2 stars, 3 books that I gave 3 stars, 3 books that I gave 4 stars, and then 3 books that I gave 5 stars. So like I said, most of my books are in the higher quality range of books that I read, and then I read one not so great book. So the first book that I want to discuss is Bleach Volume 1. This book I gave 5 stars. I loved it. This is actually a reread for me. I read this long time ago, back when I was living in New York City, and the reason why I decided to pick up the series again for this year is because they are actually finally releasing the final arc of the manga in the anime, and I think that's coming out in October. So this year it's going to be very Bleach focused. I actually just rewatched the entire Bleach anime series just because I wanted to like catch up with it. I have not watched it for years, and then I was like, well, might as well read the manga as well and, you know, get a head start to find out what's going to happen at the very end. So yeah, like I read it, loved it. But for those who don't know about Bleach, it basically follows a guy, his name is Ichigo, who has very strong like spiritual presence where he can see ghosts and perceive things, like, you know, spiritual things basically. And so one day he gets involved with a Shinigami called Rukia, and she basically, due to circumstances, ends up giving him her Shinigami powers, and so then he becomes a Shinigami and fights off these hollows, which are basically these souls that were not able to find peace, and they become corrupted essentially. And so what they want to do is they eat, you know, pure souls, or souls that have not, you know, found their way into the afterlife. And so he goes on this mission to hunt down these hollows, and then obviously as the story progresses it gets more and more complicated with a lot of different elements, a lot of different societies coming into play, a lot of different characters, and it is just such a complex story. It was one of my favorite manga series of all times, so I'm very happy to just dive into the manga series this year, and so I obviously gave this book 5 stars. Then this next book that I want to discuss is Ace of Spades, which I gave 4 stars. This book basically follows the only 2 black students at Nivea's Academy. Their names are Chiamaka and Devin, where they are suddenly selected as 2 of the senior class prefects. However, shortly after, someone called Aces starts spreading their secrets to the entire student body, which obviously turns their lives upside down. And so what started off as seemingly cruel but harmless pranks starts to turn into something more deadly and ominous. And so now the 2 of them trying to figure out what exactly is going on, who is Aces, and what is their actual purpose, like what is their end goal. This book was actually way more gripping than I imagined. I knew it was a thriller going in, but I just didn't realize how complex this book actually was. This book also showcased a really interesting like case of racism that I never really thought of before. And also, like, side note, but at the very end, like once you find out like everything, like the whole plot, like their end goal, all that stuff, my main thought was they have so much time. Like I just feel like they had a lot of time to create this situation, and I was just like, who has that kind of time to like go out of their way? But obviously these people do, and that's just like kind of crazy for me to like think about. And that's why I feel like this is a very interesting case of racism, because I just feel like the amount of effort and the amount of dedication that they needed to pull off this type of situation is just insane for me. Like they just have a lot of time on their hands, I think, and that's all I can really say about that. But the reason why I gave this book 4 stars is that even though I liked everything about the story, the characters, I did find the pacing to be a little bit weird. I feel like the second half was great. It was incredibly gripping. I was super invested. There were so many plot twists and turns, so many things that were happening. It was wild. But the first half was primarily focused on the character developments, and it was honestly quite slow. So I feel like the pacing, like I said, is just a bit off. But overall, highly recommend this book. Definitely check it out if you're interested in a really gripping thriller, a book about racism, and just a really crazy ending. So the next 2 books kind of go hand in hand together, and that is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, as well as House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. This is Crescent City 1 and Crescent City 2. Both of them I gave 5 stars. The first book is a reread for me. funny. It basically follows Bryce, who is, you know, living her best life. She has great friends, great party life, just a great life in general. Until one night she goes to a party at a club and she comes home to find her best friend as well as some of her closest friends brutally murdered by a demon. And she thought that the killer is now locked up and everything's fine, but years later, murders start happening again. And now she is at the center of the investigation. And this book also follows Hunt, who is a fallen angel who was part of the rebellion to take down the archangels until the rebellion failed, and now he's actually enslaved to the archangels. And so helping Bryce with this case might actually gain him his freedom. And so as the book continues, they uncover a dark power and pieces of the truth while also fighting off this intense attraction for each other. So like I said, this is a reread, and this was once again fucking fantastic. Like, it was so fucking good. I actually did a reading vlog on this. It wasn't like dedicated to this, but it ended up being primarily on the 2 books just because of how fast I was reading it, and it was over the weekend, so definitely check that out in case you're interested. But this book was just so good. I love the writing, I love the plot, I love the characters. Like, pretty much everything is so good. And even though this is a reread, there were just so many twists and turns and things I got caught off guard that I just was not expecting, and it was such a good way for me to just refresh my memory because I realized how little I actually remembered. And I love the romance. It was actually such a good slow burn because the 2 of them were trying to kind of deny their attraction to each other, but then as they start to like get to know each other and through their banters, you start to see them slowly fall in love with each other, and it was just so beautiful. And then for book 2, it basically follows after the first book, where Bryce and Hunt are now just trying to live their lives after everything has kind of settled down with the Asteri and the archangels. However, they soon become involved with these rebels, and now they're basically faced with the decision of either staying quiet or fighting for what's right. I'm not going to go too much into it because obviously it is the sequel, but this book was fucking phenomenal. There were so many twists and turns, and I just felt like so flabbergasted by what was going on. I also love the further development of the romance. I feel like the first book was really core to how their romance developed, and it wasn't like insta love or anything like that. And the second one was really where the romance just kind of grew more. But I was very frustrated in the beginning because of this one decision that Bryce made that I was like, why did you make this stupid decision? And even she was like regretting it like really quickly. But other than that though, like, I love the romance. And the ending, guys, the ending was so freaking good. I was like literally shocked. I kind of want to do like a reread of her book sometime soon because I feel like they're all somewhat related to each other, and I need to like go reread them just so I can like hunt down these little like clues and see how they're related to each other, because I feel like I know some of them but I don't know all of them. And this book, the ending is like shocking. Like, that is all I can say. It's literally like, what the fuck. Yeah, like, I need to just reread the whole thing, and I don't know why people don't like her books, but they're just so good. All right, then this next book that I picked up is You've Reached Sam, which I gave 3 stars. This book basically follows a girl called Julie who basically has her entire life planned out with her boyfriend until one day Sam passes away. And now she's just trying everything she can to completely forget about him and just move on. And that includes things such as not attending the service or the funeral. One day she couldn't help herself, but she just had to hear his voice one last time. So she ends up calling his phone just so she can hear his voicemail, and to her surprise, he actually picks up. So now she has a second chance of saying goodbye to him, but she also now faces the dilemma of keeping her calls with Sam while watching everyone else grieve around her. This book I had such high expectations for. This was one of my most anticipated releases. I just felt like it sounded like such a beautiful, powerful book, but there are just so many things that just seem so unrealistic, especially with the portrayal of grief. And I know that grief is portrayed in many different ways and people react to it differently. They do their own thing, like, that's totally fine. I just feel like there's so many things about how grief was portrayed from Julie, from her classmates, from her teachers, that just seem so unrealistic. For example, her teacher basically didn't even think that the death of her boyfriend was a good enough excuse for her to basically give her an extension for her assignment. Like, And this is like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks later. Like, it was not like, you know, months later. It was within the same month. And her teacher was like, sorry, but that's not good enough excuse. Like, I just feel like, wouldn't you be like supportive as a teacher? I don't know, I just felt that was so weird. And not only that, but like all of her classmates primarily like bullied her because they accused her of being the cause for his death rather than being supportive. Like, I don't know, I just feel like it's such a interesting dynamic, I guess. Or the fact that her mom was just MIA. Like, I think her mom showed like once or twice, and her mom didn't even try to find help for her, like, you know, a grief counselor, nothing. Literally was just like kind of like, oh, how are you feeling? Okay, I have to go to work, bye. And then like we won't see her again until like the very end of the book. Like, I just feel like as a parent, you should be even more involved when something tragic like this happens for your daughter. It's just so, like, I just feel like the betrayal was just very strange to me. So overall, I just feel like even though I loved, you know, like the concept of this book and the plot itself, I just think that as the main primary like plot for the grief, there are just too many incidences that just seems unbelievable and unrealistic that it definitely made the book more 3 stars than anything. Then this next book that I picked up is Trail of Lightning, which I also gave 3 stars. So this book is set after a climate apocalypse where the formerly Navajo reservation has been reborn into Dinata, where gods and legends actually walk the earth as well as monsters. And the book follows Maggie, who is actually a Dinata monster hunter, as well as a supernaturally gifted killer due to her clan's powers. One day she is asked to hunt down a monster, and she finds out that there's something terrifying going on. And due to circumstances, she ends up partnering up with Kai, who is a medicine man, and together the two of them go on a journey to find out what is truly happening. I really like the mix of dystopian slash sci-fi with an urban fantasy setting, especially paired with Navajo culture and background. I just found that to be super fascinating. But unfortunately, I was not really a fan of the characters, and the pacing of the plot just seemed a bit off as well. And not only that, but I never really fully understood the plot. I felt like just when they have some sort of goal, some sort of mission, they will go towards it, and then they'll get, you know, something will distract them, and then they'll go somewhere else, and then they'll completely forget what their initial goal was. And so I'm just like, it was like that like over and over again. So it was just very confusing for me as a reader. So while I was really hoping to love this book because of all the rave that I got from this book when it first came out like a few years ago, unfortunately I don't think it really met my expectations. Then this next book that I picked up is Beautiful World, Where Are You? This book I gave 3 stars. So this basically follows the lives of 4 individuals. One is Alice, who is a novelist who one day randomly ends up meeting a guy called Felix, and for some reason she decides to invite him to go to Rome with her for a book event. It also follows Eileen, who is Alice's best friend from college, who is now dealing with a breakup, and because of this she ends up rekindling her relationship with Simon, who is a childhood friend. And so the book just basically follows the 4 of them as they navigate through life, through love, through friendship, etc. So this is actually my first Sally Rooney book, and I do not think this is that good of a book. I liked some of the messages in here, but that was kind of it. First of all, I hated the characters. So this is actually my first book club pick. I don't know if you had watched my previous videos. I mentioned that I had started a book club, and this is a book that a lot of people want to read. So I was like, cool, sounds good, I want to read this anyways. I've heard so much about this author, and it was just not the greatest book. I hated the characters. I hated all of them. I feel like it was kind of a consensus that all the characters are very unlikable. But what was the redeeming part was the quotes and some of the messages in this book about, you know, who you really are and just having the right expectations for the people around you. And the other thing that I was very confused about this book was the friendship. So Eileen and Alice were supposed to be best friends from college, but other than the random like emails which were very like heartfelt, showed like their deep friendship, when they actually meet in person, it just felt so like strained, and it just felt very off to me. Like they didn't feel like best friends. So I don't know, I am hesitant to pick up another Sally Rooney book just because I feel like this one was such a subpar book. I'm still give it 3 stars because I feel like there are messages, like I said, that was good, but I don't know. Let me know down below if you think I should give her writing another chance, because this was just, I don't know. Also, I realized there's like a total like weird thing about it, but I listened to the book on audio and I didn't notice this because the narrator did a really good job of just like, you know, showcasing all the characters and everything, but in the actual book there's no quotation marks. So it is just such a bizarre way of writing, because I feel like as a reader I was trying to find the quotes later to, you know, tab them and show them to my book club members, and I couldn't find them because it was so hard to track down where actual quotes was happening in the book because there are no quotation marks. So just a little side bit, you know, in case you're trying to read this book physically and you are caught off guard. So FYI there. All right, then this next book that I picked up is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which I gave 4 stars. So this book follows a woman called Chloe Brown who is chronically ill with not a lot of close friends. She's only close to her sisters, and so one day she decides to make a list, a bucket list, a get a life list. But for her it's actually not easy to actually execute some of these plans, so she decides to enlist the help of her maintenance guy, Red. However, easier said than done, because the two of them don't exactly have the best relationship and they're not exactly on the friendliest of terms. However, as they start to hang out more with each other, things start to happen between the two of them. This book was so freaking cute and adorable. I really liked how the romance was gradual and it was not instant love at all, and I just liked how as the story progressed the two of them just slowly start to fall in love with each other as they get to know more about each other. And I just adored how Red treated Chloe with her chronic illness and just went out of his way to make sure she was comfortable. And the only like downside, which is why it's not a 5-star read, is I feel like the ending had this really out of nowhere drama. Like it was just so extra. Like I feel like the drama was fine, like how it came, but like how they both reacted to it just made it seem so extreme. Like it was something that you see at a K-drama. Like it was so like out there that I was like what's going on all of a sudden. So I just feel like that part just kind of threw me off, because their relationship was so good. It was all about communication, their love for each other, like all that was really good, and suddenly that last drama just made it feel like all their, you know, shared experiences and their formal communication skills just went out the door. So I don't know what happened there, but I was not a huge fan of that drama. Basically, it just seemed way more dramatic than it really needed to be. Then this next book that I picked up is Plain Bad Heroines, which I gave 2 stars. So a century ago, 2 girls are absolutely fascinated with a book by an author called Mary McLean, and they end up creating a secret society called the Plain Bad Heroines Society at their boarding school. However, they wind up dead in a very macabre way, and 5 years later the school actually closes down when more deaths follow. Fast forward to a century later, a writer actually writes a breakout novel about feminists in the Gilded Age institution, and so a movie is actually set to be filmed at the exact same boarding school. However, once they arrive to film this movie, things start to happen. This book unfortunately was really not for me as well. I felt very confused, especially with all the time jumps between the century past and the century now, and it just felt weird. I also felt like there were a lot of times when the author just kept going around in plot circles, like she was repeating herself and kind of going around the same circle but in a different way, but it just was like the same exact thing. So it just made things way more complicated and very confusing. And while I typically enjoy like flowery writing and very descriptive writing, I don't think this is, I don't know, for some reason this one is just not for me. All right, then the last and final book I want to discuss is Iron Widow, which I gave 4 stars. This book is inspired by ancient China, set in a futuristic sci-fi setting where boys and girls pair up to power up these chrysalises to fight off these mecha aliens. But the issue is at the end of every single fight, the girls wind up dead because of the mental strain. And so the book follows a girl called Zetian who ends up offering herself as a concubine to be the other half of a pair who powers up these chrysalises as revenge for the fact that her sister actually died in one of these, and her revenge is to really kill off the boy who killed her sister. However, her plan ends up getting accomplished in a way that no one expected when she ends up killing the boy in the psychic link, and she is the one who ends up victorious once the fight is over. And so now she's considered as an Iron Widow, where basically she is the one who is powering the chrysalis and using the boys as like fodder. And so as a way to control and subdue her, she is now paired with Li Shimin, who is one of the most powerful pilots to date. And as the story progresses, she learns more about the war and why is it that it's always girls who are being sacrificed. This was such an interesting read and concept, and I love the display of the Chinese historical references / culture, such as the binding of feet as well as the subjugation of females. The romance is also very unique because it's actually a MFM polyamorous romance, which is very unheard of, especially in a Chinese background. And I loved how that came to be as well. Like, it was not an instant kind of situation. They had so many struggles that they had to face together and separately, and as they kind of like come to realization, their feelings for each other just kind of develop, and I love that progression. The plot was also incredibly fast-paced and very action-packed, but the downside is at the beginning of the book, the pacing of the plot was a bit slow, and the world building, especially in the beginning, was a bit confusing and kind of hard to follow. But now that everything's out of the way, I'm very excited to pick up the sequel when it comes out, because it definitely leaves things off in a huge cliffhanger, and I was shocked by what was revealed at the very end. So anyways, those are all the books that I want to discuss this time around in February. Let me know down below, which books did you read in February? Have you read any of the books that I read this time around? What did you guys think of them? But as always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up if it does help out my channel. And if you'd like to see more content of me, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below, as well as hit the notification bell. And as always, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!